Hey all, and welcome to Monday, and of course that means welcome to Countdown Day here on the channel. And this has been a long time coming. This one definitely required a bit of research, and the voting was sort of all over the map. Why? Because our topic this time around is going to be the top 10 plot holes, loose ends, unanswered questions in all of Transformers in the latest GotBot Counts Down. Hey all, welcome back to the channel. I'm your host, your most humble of hosts, Dennis Moulton, aka GotBot. As always, man, please like, comment, share, of course, subscribe, and while you're at it, light them up, baby. And hit that notification bell, please. It helps me out a ton. It lets you know when content of all sorts goes up here on the channel. Check out Machinery of Man, The Everything Factor, all the groups that I'm either a mod or an admin for, as well as all my social media links. All of that in the description down below. If you are in a position to help the channel to grow, you can use the donate link. Check us out on Patreon. See what we offer to you through Teespring. Or, of course, hit the join button right here on YouTube to become a channel member. And, yeah, we have the top 10 kind of plot holes, unanswered questions in all of Transformers. Some of these do have answers. Some of these have debatable answers. Some of these have theories behind them. So we'll sort of address it as we go through. But before we can get to the list, naturally, we have to do our honorable mentions first. And in our honorable mentions, we have votes that came in for who made up Cyclonus' Armada. Again, we'll talk about that in a little bit because it sort of ties in with a later topic. Not to give anything away. Dreamwave. Just Dreamwave, because there were a lot of loose ends that were left there and unresolved plots. Why? Because the company ended up closing up shop, such as life. Where did Rodimus Prime go in Headmasters? Now we know he was looking for a new planet after the destruction of Cybertron, but we never really heard anything of it after, which also begs another question. Because at the time he was back to being Rodimus Prime and therefore left with the matrix of leadership intact inside his body, how did Lio Convoy and Big Convoy in Beast Wars 2 and Beast Wars Neo have a version of the Matrix? Was it the Matrix or was it just a Matrix? So there's a few questions there that kind of link together that sort of don't make sense. I always kind of took it in my mind that, well, the Matrix went with Rodimus and was never seen again. But, very good point about at least those two having a version of the Matrix. The question is, was it the Matrix? There you go. A few unanswered plots even before we get to the list. Also in the honorable mentions, where does Optimus Prime's trailer go? A lot of times that is explained as a micro-universe. If there's any truth to it, I don't know. And finally, why does Megatron keep Starscream around? Good question. Good question. And I don't even know if Megatron would have the answer for you. But none of those made the list. What did? Well, we're about to find out when we kick things off with number 10. No, let me lay it down. With number 10 first. At number 10, we have an oldie but a goodie. Can the Autobots fly? Most often it has been kind of a known rule, regulation, so to speak, that the Decepticons, because they are military hardware, could fly, and the Autobots, who are more consumer goods, could not. This goes back to you know, that episode where the Decepticons are first created and we have Ariel and Orion Pax, and I think Orion Pax actually says, like, look at those new robots, they can fly. But if you go right back to more than meets the eye, the Autobots could fly. In fact, a little bit later, we saw them fly again a few episodes later, but at the same time, there was, you know, an instance early on in Season 1 where Optimus asks for Sideswipe's backpack so that he can kind of go after a Decepticon ship because the Autobots can't fly. It is not kind of easily explained. Here's kind of the going theory behind it. The going theory is that the Autobots do have the ability to fly to a limited degree, not as proficient and not to the extent that the Decepticons can. Therefore, they are impressed by the Decepticons' aerial abilities. It is also further proposed, in theory, that among the Decepticons, the Seekers are the best flyers, followed by characters like Megatron and Soundwave, who have more anti-gravity than they do a keen flying ability. So while they can fly, and fly better than the Autobots, they can't fly as well as the Seekers. It makes sense. Why then on Earth do the Autobots typically not fly? Well, the idea again is that it's about energy conservation. The Decepticons do not care about plundering Earth for all of its energy, and therefore they fly and they just take more energy. The Autobots are trying to kind of stop that pillaging from taking place. Therefore, they only use the bare amount necessary for operation, and therefore the luxury of flying is put aside as an ability that we no longer have. I get it. Whether you think that it's just poor writing and poor editing, which probably is, or whether you ascribe to the idea that the Autobots can, but kind of choose not to in order to conserve energy on Earth, that's up to you. But anyway you cut it, because there's enough murky water and enough debate, whether or not the Autobots could fly was able to take the number 10 slot. Number 9 takes us to the movies, and where was Barricade? We all know that Barricade appeared in the kind of initial Bay trilogy, but that he was not in the Last Night film, and then magically reappeared with a new look, no less, in The Last Night. So where was he during the events of Age of Extinction and part of Dark of the Moon? Because a lot of people said, hey, he wasn't in that final battle. The idea has been proposed that he actually kind of went into hiding. He realized that things weren't going to go the Decepticons' way, so he went in hiding until his leader would have a resurgence, and he saw that it was time to once again fall in rank and file. It's a simple explanation, but you know what? It's probably the most logical, and it would certainly match a Decepticon. Again, any way you want to cut it, there's enough debate and enough kind of curiosity about exactly what happened that Barricade, and where he was too for a movie and a half, took the number 9 slot. Number 8 is another oldie but a goodie. How did Dinobot II have Dinobot's memories? After all, he was just a clone. A couple of theories kind of go hand in hand here. First things first, there was an unproduced episode called Dark Glass, in which Rat Trap would have downloaded memories that really Dinobot had uploaded to the computer to kind of, I guess, save a part of him, knowing that there was a good chance he wasn't going to survive. He would have, Rat Trap would have taken those memories and uploaded them into Dinobot 2 so that Dinobot 2 could kind of remember who he was and see the era of his ways. However, there's still a memory there of being in the cavern during the attack, which really wouldn't have been part of those data tracks. It wouldn't have been something that would have been able to have been uploaded to Dinobot 2. So how would Dinobot 2 have had that memory? The idea is because he's a clone of the original Dinobot, perhaps part of the original Dinobot spark, somewhere deep inside, actually hid away, dormant, and eventually reactivated itself. Whether you believe that Dinobot 2 having the memories shouldn't have happened, or whether you believe that it's because of, you know, the missed unproduced episode Dark Glass, or whether you like to just believe that just a little bit of the original Dinobot survived, enough people wondered why Dinobot 2 had those memories that it was able to take the number 8 slot. Number 7. What happened to Dion? Remember Dion, Orion Pax's like best friend in G1? Well, we all know that things kind of went south for Dion, but what was his final fate? What actually ended up happening to him? Here's where things get interesting. A lot of theory have proposed that, in fact, Dion did technically survive, the same way Orion Pax survived. Orion Pax became Optimus Prime. The theory states that Dion became none other than Ultra Magnus. What would support this theory? A couple of things. One, during the, I believe it was the Dreamwave run, if I'm not mistaken, Alpha Trion says that he has a specific bond to Optimus and Ultra Magnus. Well, he rebuilt Optimus, so if he rebuilt Dion into Ultra Magnus, it would sort of make sense. Furthermore, in Scramble City and then things like the Return of Optimus Prime and whatnot, he speaks to Ultra Magnus, even on his deathbed, he speaks to Ultra Magnus as if he's an old friend, someone he's known for a long, long time. Why would he know Ultra Magnus for a long, long time? We hadn't seen Ultra Magnus for 2 seasons worth of program, but yet he's an old friend of Optimus Prime's. The only way that really makes sense is if it is in fact Dion. Is Ultra Magnus Dion? What was Dion's final fate? We don't know, but there's enough interesting theories there that it's nice to postulate and ponder whether or not he became the fan favorite Ultra Magnus. Anyway you cut it, Dion's final fate and what became of him took the number 7 slot. And here we are at number 6 now, and again it takes us back to the movie, specifically The Last Knight, and the question of how did Galvatron from Age of Extinction become Megatron again in The Last Knight? Great question, and I think a lot of that boils down to poor editing. We do see fairly early on a version of Megatron, and he has the red streak across his face, the red streak that is produced when you are touched, slapped, whatever, by Quintessa. And Quintessa is kind of presented as sort of a godlike, prime-like type of figure and character. She was able to slap Optimus and make him into Nemesis Prime. The idea is that somewhere on the cutting room floor, she slapped Galvatron, and he was once again reborn into being Megatron. This would be very akin to what happened in G1 much later when Dark Nova would get the body of Galvatron and revive it as Super Megatron and then Ultra Megatron. Except within the context of the movie, instead of Dark Nova doing the reborn again Megatron type of thing, it was Quintessa who done that. Is it on the cutting room floor? Was it a scene that actually happened? Possibly. Has it been confirmed? Not to my knowledge, but that's not to say it wasn't. Anyway you cut it, the oddity of Galvatron once again becoming Megatron took the number 6 slot. And here we are at the most coveted of locations with one of the most confusing of questions. We are at the halfway mark. And wouldn't you know that at the halfway mark we go to Robots in Disguise 2015 of all things, and the question of why Windblade, who was apparently in stasis for 1,000 years, did not wake up when Unicron was awoken during Transformers Prime. Why do I link them? Because RID 2015 is a continuation of Transformers Prime. If she was in stasis for 1,000 years, you would think, and her mission was a specific mission from Primus, but you would think that she would wake up when Unicron did to help combat against him, but she didn't. So why? Well, here's where things get a little bit murky with that. So she didn't because the mission that she was given by Primus was to recover the Decepticons that had been aboard the, and I'm looking at my notes here because I want to make sure that I say it, the Alchemir prison ship. It was an Autobot prison ship, and it basically crashed, and when the Alchemir crashed, she was reawoken because I guess Primus knew that this was going to happen, and her job was to get those Decepticons back. Now, here's where it gets kind of weird. If she was in stasis for 1,000 years, then how much time has actually passed between the end of the events of Transformers Prime, or Beasts, or Predacons Rising even, and RID 2015? I figured it was in fairly close proximity. But it has been postulated, it has been stated that her mission was given to her after the defeat of Unicron and after the restoration of Cybertron took place, which is exactly what happened in Transformers Prime. Did 1,000 years pass between Transformers Prime and RID 2015? Did humanity evolve to the point that Denny was what we turn into eventually? I don't know. I find that timeline a little wishy-washy. But it is interesting to note that apparently the reason she didn't wake up is because at that time she actually wasn't in stasis, she wasn't on Earth, and she did not have her mission from Primus. If you want to believe that, you also have to believe that 1,000 years passed. That one's a little hard to swallow for me. How does it play out? How does the timeline go? Well, that's half the fun of these questions, and that's half the fun of these plot holes and problems. And kind of where Windblade from RID 2015 fits in, takes the halfway mark this time around. At the number 4 slot, we have another question of someone's fate. Last we saw Arachnid, she had her army of basically the undead around her, of all those Insecticons. And it looks as though, or looked as though, they were closing in on her. And I believe it ends, I believe her last appearance ends with her screaming. We never saw her after that. We never saw her really in Robots in Disguise 2015. So she had this Insecticon army, this somewhat undead Insecticon army. Did she have full control over them, or did they actually devour her? We're kind of left to speculate to our own imagination. Me, personally, I have always assumed that they devoured her, that her own minions turned on her. Do I know that for sure? No. Could she have regained control? Possibly. Will we ever see her again? Doubtful. But I'd certainly like to. Anyway you cut it, the final fate of Arachnid and her forces takes the number 4 slot. Number 3 yet again takes us back to the movies and the whole idea of Unicron being inside Earth. And a lot of people said, we don't know where that was going. There were horns. He didn't like being touched. And a lot of people don't like the idea of Unicron being in Earth. That's a terrible idea. He's his own planet. It was done on Transformers Prime and kind of explained somewhat elegantly. I do think that it could be handled a little bit better. Here's the thing. We always know that the Transformers end up coming to Earth. Why? Why do they always come here? Why not any of the other planets in all of the cosmos? Why always Earth? What would that link really be? And I thought that it was somewhat brilliant in Transformers Prime when it was noted that, you know what, Primus resides within the core of Cybertron, and Unicron is the core of Earth. Why then is Earth organic? Again, you got to stick with me with the theory here a little bit, okay? Apparently Earth is organic because Unicron was a smaller body, still planet-sized, but a smaller body who went dormant. And all of the debris and dust of space and microbes and whatnot settled and built and became layer upon layer upon layer while he slept, while he slumbered, and eventually became organic. The idea is also expanded upon that the reason in Beast Machines Cybertron is able to be restored to an organic state is because Primus, again, is dormant at the inner core and covered with space dust and microbes, was actually organic. And the whole reason Cybertron became metallic was because of cyberforming that was undertaken by the Quintessons years later. And that's more of a shell, so like there's a metallic shell, inside that an organic kind of layer, we'll say, and then inside that at the core, Primus himself. That's the theory. And it's been proposed that on Earth, what happened was you had Unicron at that core, surrounded by the organic shell, but there was no cyberforming, so there was no metallic shell on the outside. The theory further states that the planet that we know as Unicron resides within the crust core that is Earth. There's a lot to digest there, and you really have to accept that Unicron and Primus have been dormant and sleeping for maybe billions of years so that an entire planet could build around them. I don't know if that's kind of the theory, if that's kind of the route that The Last Knight would go. Do I think we've seen the end of that storyline? I actually don't. I think the day will come when the multiverse of the films, and probably then some, will somewhat collapse unto itself. And I think that we will once again revisit Unicron's horns sticking out of Earth. I understand not liking it, but I also understand that if you accept them being dormant and space dust kind of building up on them over billions of years, that it sort of makes sense in an elegant way. And with Primus being Cybertron and Unicron being Earth, it does inevitably link both planets. Whether there's any truth to it is another story. Anyway you cut it, it got enough votes, and it's certainly questionable in nature that it took the number 3 slot. At number 2, we have another one that's open to debate, but it's a much easier debate than what we had at number 3. Number 2 is, who was Cyclonus? And associated, as mentioned in our honorable mentions, what happened to his armada? Okay, so we all know that during Unicron's speech in the '86 animated film, we had the reformatting of some Insecticons and Thundercracker into Scourge and the Sweeps. Then we also know that we had Bombshell and we had Skywarp, who got reformatted into Cyclonus and his armada. If we look at the actual animation, in the foreground, where our attention is first taken, while Unicron's talking, he says, I give you Cyclonus, and the first one who gets formatted is Bombshell. So, based on the animation, Bombshell is Cyclonus. And then Unicron says, and his armada. And that's when Skywarp finishes being reformatted into and his armada. However, it has been stated more than once and from official sources that that was an animation error that never should have happened. And according to, I believe, Flint Dille himself, and I could be mistaken on this, but this is what I've heard, that Flint Dille says that the intention was for Skywarp to be Cyclonus. And it would match. Cyclonus is vehemently loyal to Galvatron, and Skywarp was vehemently loyal to Megatron. Right from More Than Meets the Eye. As soon as he awoke, he actually goes and drags Megatron over to the I don't know what you call it, the beam that's doing the scanning aboard the Ark, and he says, Megatron, my master, we live again. So his loyalty to Megatron is very akin to Cyclonus's. He has purple, Cyclonus has purple. I think the intention is that Cyclonus is supposed, well, Skywarp is supposed to be Cyclonus. But if we actually go strictly by the actual animation, it would be Bombshell who became Cyclonus. The animation says one thing, but the hearts and the fandom say another. Which one you choose to believe and which one you choose to follow is up to you. But anyway you cut it, who exactly became Cyclonus takes the number 2 slot. And now we're at number 1, the biggest plot hole, the biggest unanswered question, the biggest loose end in all of Transformers. The origins of the G1 Constructicons. I kind of touched on this not that long ago. So, we all know that at the very end of Season 1, in the last episode of Season 1, the Constructicons, they show up, they become Devastator, and Megatron says that, you know, we've done well to spend the time building them here in the caverns. I can't remember the exact quote, but he basically says, yeah, it was a good idea to build these guys in the caverns, which would indicate that the Constructicons were made on Earth. Of course, that does beg the question why they didn't need to get personalities from Vector Sigma. I mean, Menasor and the Stunticons did, the Aerial Bots did. I don't understand why the Dinobots didn't have to get their personalities from Vector Sigma either. But those are kind of aside questions. It would look like the Constructicons were built on Earth. But then later on in The Secret of Omega Supreme, we learned that, in fact, apparently the Constructicons were friends of his and helped build Crystal City way back before there were Autobots and Decepticons on Cybertron. In fact, it is even shown that the Constructicons were present at Megatron's birth, we'll call it, at his activation. So, did the Constructicons have a hand in kind of building Megatron, or did Megatron build the Constructicons? Is it the chicken or the egg? Now, that being said, it has been proposed that much like Starscream with the Combaticons, the personality components already existed from the Constructicons and they were brought to Earth with new bodies that were built by Megatron on Earth, and then the personality components were just added to them. That would make sense. Of course, it does beg the question, why did the Constructicons have Earth construction vehicle modes on Cybertron way back with Omega Supreme? That's another kind of question unto itself. It's also been pointed out that the Constructicons in the Timelines storyline, if you know that, were in fact rebuilt on Earth. And that kind of makes it official that, yeah, they weren't built on Earth, they were rebuilt on Earth. But there's still a problem with that as well, because in that storyline, we still don't have Hook or Mixmaster. They are both replaced by the Constructicon Hightower. And then there's Holler. If Holler was a Constructicon, why did he exist with the Autobots? The idea is that he avoided the Robo Smasher back on Cybertron that made the Constructicons evil, and then he sided with the Autobots. There's a lot of confusion around the Constructicons' creation, whether they came first or Megatron came first, as well as kind of their roles and why they had the alt modes that they had, because they really shouldn't have had them. The confusion around the Constructicons and their existence is so entrenched in the fandom that it had to take the #1 slot. And there you have it, baby. We've gone once again from 10 down to 1, and we've covered a lot of fan theories. Hope you kept up. If you got to go back and re-listen to it, do so, because some of it's pretty complex. There's a certain elegant nature to all of those theories fitting together, but there's always going to be things that stand out. What else didn't make the list or the honorable mentions, but did come up? Let's see. What about the time jump between Season 2 and Scramble City? How much time actually passed there? Why did the Autobots at the end of More Than Meets the Eye, when they were getting ready to leave Earth, why in the 4th episode were they still on Earth and didn't leave? I thought that all the governments of the world were giving them the energy they needed to leave. Even Optimus says to Spike, we're getting ready to leave. But they don't. They stay. The theory there, by the way, is that they stayed because the Decepticons didn't have a way to leave. And if the Autobots left, well, the Decepticons would have been able to pillage Earth anyway. What else do we have here? How come the Dinobots never needed to go to Vector Sigma? In Age of Extinction, it's indicated that a lockdown has hunted every dead character. Like, that seems pretty far-fetched that this guy would have the time to kind of take out all of these characters that efficiently, that quickly. Let's see. Why does the Nemesis Prime and Transformers Prime look like the Optimus robot? It's fine to be the truck, but you wouldn't think that they would specifically build a robot to look like Optimus Prime. How did the Autobots and the Decepticons become the Maximals and the Predacons? I think that's a good one, but I believe that that was probably addressed in Beast Wars Uprising, if I'm not mistaken. What else do we have here? In Revenge of the Fallen, okay, so a Prime, it's stated, a Prime can only kill a Prime. So if that's the case, why was Megatron able to kill Optimus? Maybe Optimus was never dead. Somebody said, during this vote, somebody said, no, the line was that only a Prime can kill the Fallen. That's not what it was. It was only a Prime can kill a Prime. So it's a very interesting kind of take on it. The theory and the idea proposed is that Optimus's death wasn't really a death. He just had to be reunited with the Matrix. That's why when the Matrix was put in him, he's still alive, he's still fine, because he was never really dead. He was just kind of turned off. Really weird theory there. Who built Unicron? A lot would say Primacron, a lot would say the One, if you want to go back in the lore that far. I love this one. Why does Wheelie exist? That and so many more questions. I hope I've helped clear some of the air, or at least give you food for thought for what theories work for you and your headcanon. I appreciate you guys coming by, giving me some of your extremely valuable time. I do know how important it is to you. If you are in a position to help the channel to grow, you can use the donate link, check us out on Patreon, see what we offer to you through Teespring, or of course hit the join button right here on YouTube to become a channel member. Whew. While you're at, hit the subscribe button, stick around, have some fun with us here on the channel, and don't forget that somehow, some way, each and every single solitary day, you right there do make a difference. And I look forward, baby, to the next time that you and I get together to have another visit, either in the live streams on Thursday nights at the stop motion premieres, or the old-fashioned way, baby, right here inside the videos.